Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Platt from the Philadelphia Citizen.
I'm Roxanne Patel Shapalavi, also from the Philadelphia Citizen. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we are psyched to see you all and to honor not only Suzy with this tremendous book, but also Sue Jacobson. When Sue Jacobson asks you to do something, we show up. Yeah. So just a couple of quick announcements, and then we'll get to the fun. The Philadelphia Citizen, I don't know how many of you, someone just told me, well, who are you? I've never heard of you. The Philadelphia Citizen is a nonprofit, nonpartisan media organization that seeks to defibrillate democracy in the American city where it was born. Yeah. I love that.
Can we take you with us everywhere?
The cheer squad. We're about to have an election next week, where if we're lucky, we might get 15% turnout in the birthplace of American democracy. That's not good enough. So we exist to not only shed light on the issues, but also every story that Roxanne and her crack staff put together. They also put together do something guides for you to make your city better, because liking something on Facebook is not civic engagement. Actually getting off your ass and doing stuff is sort of what the founders intended. So that's our mission, and part of what we do is this most old-fashioned kind of social networking, actually coming together like we're doing tonight to talk about ideas that can make our common purpose all the more rewarding. So I can't thank you enough for taking this time out of your busy schedules to honor that tradition of our shared sense of adventure and common purpose. Rox?
So we have a couple other events that I just want to mention to you since you're all here. So next Tuesday, May 20th, is, first of all, Election Day. So I know everybody in this room is going to vote. And then take a picture of your ballot, bring your sticker, and come to the Citizens Development for Good event. We do a series of events that are all about how private development and public placemaking can reshape the city to be a good city for everybody. And we have Charles Lomax from Lomax Real Estate, and we have Kelvin Jeremiah, who runs the Philadelphia Housing Authority. And they are both going to be talking about two different developments that they are involved in that basically exemplify the idea of the 15-minute city, where everything you need is within a few blocks of 15 minutes of where you live. And then on Thursday, the 22nd, if you bring your sticker or proof of voting, we're going to give you a gift. So bring it. You'll get a free citizen gift of your choice.
Like this crowd needs incentive to vote.
It does. I'm just saying, tell your friends and have them come to the event, and they'll get a T-shirt or a pack of cards. It'll be exciting. And then Thursday, we have one of our favorite events of the year, which is particularly pertinent this year, which is our Integrity Icon celebration. And this is in which we have identified 5 city workers who really exemplify high integrity and going above and beyond to be good stewards of their city and provide good customer service to all of us. And I think it's safe to say that this year that feels especially pertinent. So I'm excited to see all of you there.
And Michael Nutter will be presenting the awards to those city workers with integrity, and it's a great uplifting event. I spent a lot of time, to those of you who know the Citizen, I spent a lot of time shaming our bad actors, which is also important, right? All the perp walks. But we also want to name and fame those who do good. That's sort of what we exist for. And finally, just a shout out to our bookseller, Head House Books, who came through for us tonight.
So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our co-presenter at this event, and really the person who brought this to us, Sue Jacobson, who runs Jacobson Strategic Communications, but is more than that, is a wonderful, incredible civic leader in this city, who ran the Chamber of Commerce Board during during the pandemic, a really hard time in Philly, has worked in city government, is a mentor to many, many people, especially women in this city. And if you don't already know her, I don't know where you have lived, maybe under a rock for the last however many years. But let's give a big hand for Sue.
Thank you so much.
So hi, everybody. How much fun is this? And let's start, I have to say, a huge thank you to Larry and Roxanne. Larry, I remember meeting you when the Citizen was a vision. And look at what the two of you have done to really transform our city. You know, if you, Larry, how many times have I sent you emails saying, that article was so important, right? And so the work they're doing, for anybody who doesn't know the Citizen, you really should check it out because they're doing some really wonderful things. And I can't thank you enough for that. And thank you right now for being with me to celebrate and help put together this event for my best friend, Suzy Welch, who I am so wildly proud of. I promised I wouldn't embarrass her, so please come up, Suzy, and stand right here. Yeah, come on. Yeah, really. She said, do not embarrass. And I'll give you my speech. No, I'm kidding. So I wanted to share about Suzy and our friendship. I know. I got yelled at the other day because, I don't know, she said I speak in platitudes, so I had to look up the word platitude. But I speak in truths, as you all know. I tell it like it is. And so, sorry that I'm embarrassing you, but I do want to share, we were camp counselors together when we were 18 years old. And I know, and it was an overnight girls' summer camp. We taught tennis. And what I actually remember the first day that I saw Suzy. She was sitting on the stairs of Lodge 1. You know, they had very fancy names back then. But I knew right away that there was something, real. I know. Can I go sit down? No. That there was really something special about her. I want to do this because it means something to me, but something special and something really unique. And, you know, I think if you want me to sum it up, you have this like crazy ability to see around corners. You do. And I know you hate this, but you're kind of brilliant. Okay. And you'll hear it. All right. It's getting worse and worse. All right, I'm working on it. But actually one of the things that we both love is that, as you would say, to quote you, we laugh our faces off. And actually, my husband, Michael, who's here, knows, and my daughter, Elizabeth, they know when I'm talking to Suzy on the phone because they hear me shrieking with laughter, and they're like, oh, it's Suzy. So we really do have a ton of fun, and I wish that for us for always. But let's fast forward. So this is like the Suzy that you all may or may not know. Who have you become? You are a 3-time winner of the New York Times best-selling authors list. I mean, you're a Wall Street Journal contributor. You're a Today Show and NBC regular. You're an NYU professor, and you've already become, in less than a week, I think we're one of the first steps on your tour, you have become the #1 on Amazon in the world. I mean, which is huge. They're the largest books, and that just came out, and that's really amazing, but forgive me, I'm not surprised. Of course we knew that. And so, but to me, and sorry, but you are an outrageously giving and wonderful friend and fun friend, so I love you. And now we are really lucky because we have Jean Chatzky, who came in.
So it's over for me.
You just have to stand here. But Jean Chatzky was here to interview Suzy, and Jean actually was the financial editor of the Today Show. She has this great podcast, HerMoney, with a lot of followers. And so she in her own right is a real superstar, and we're just so happy to have her. So the two of them are going to chat now, and I hope you have a lot of fun hearing about Suzy's Becoming You and how extraordinary it is.
Very hard to follow, I have to just say. I want to add my thanks to Larry and Roxanne and Sue for pulling this together. I am always happy to chat with the amazing Suzy Welch. And I have to say, so we have known each other now for almost 2 decades. Almost 2 decades. And Becoming You, for those of you who haven't dug into it yet, I know you all will, it's all about helping people, some of whom might be stuck, make decisions about what to do. We met in the beginning of the 2000s. You were a columnist for O Magazine, and you wrote a piece called 10-10-10. It was a decision-making framework centered on thinking how this particular decision that you were pondering might impact you in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years. And I vividly remember reading this article and thinking, where have you been my whole life? So let's start there. Where did 10-10-10 come from? And do you agree with me that it was in some ways the launch pad for this work?
Oh, okay, great question. Thank you, Jean. Hi, everybody. I'm Suzy. Very happy to be here. It's a great question because I sometimes ask, well, how did I get to become me? I'm sitting here with a methodology to help people become themselves, become their authentic selves. And so where does that, where does the Suzy story start? The relationship between 10-10-10, which went on to be a book that was blessedly very successful for a long time. It's about to be reissued in March, actually. That book says, that book was born out of actually one of the most difficult, agonizing times in my life. I was a working mother with 4 young children, and my first marriage was a disaster. And I was asked to give a speech in Hawaii in front of a bunch of insurance executives, and I said, yes, I've got to do it. My roof was being repaired. I was completely out of money. Everything was falling apart. And I thought, well, how do I go to Hawaii, give a speech in front of a bunch of insurance executives, and also have 4 young children at home? And so I decided to bring 2 of the children with me. I mean, it was a form of madness. And in fact, the organizer of the speech said, we really can't have children here. And I was like, don't worry, my children are like little adults. And it was just crazy. And so they got sick on the plane. I gave one of them sun poisoning by putting on too much sunscreen. And I was just a wreck. I mean, I was a train wreck. I was a woman. I actually, in those days, thought that you could be a person who could do it all at the same time. I thought I was going to be the one woman who actually did that in the history of humanity. That was going to be me, Suzy. So it got worse and worse and worse, and I was letting the client down, and everything was a complete disaster. And then the day of the speech came, and it was 1,500 insurance executives, all men. They were golfing every single day, day in, day out. And then they're brought inside one morning. Why? To hear, I was at the time an editor of the Harvard Business Review, to hear an editor of the Harvard Business Review give them a speech about the history of management. Okay, don't all jump up from excitement, okay? That's what it was. The history of management. I was wearing a gray suit with a bow shirt, and that morning, to make that speech, I warehoused my 2 little children that I brought with me in a hula dancing class. Yeah. So like, that moment when your child looks at you and you think, if I get killed someday, this will be the moment it all started. I thought Roscoe, the older one, was going to kill me. It was so bad. But I got up and I gave the speech. And it was a room like this, except for 10 times larger. And there were glass doors at the back. And I was up giving a speech with a big screen up behind me. And I actually, at one point, saw the kids plaster themselves against those glass windows. And then I thought, is this happening? It cannot possibly be happening. It is happening. And they made a jailbreak. They broke down the center aisle. They came running down screaming, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," in their hula skirts. Nobody thought it was funny. Now, if this happened today, I'd be viral. Yeah, I'd be absolutely viral. I'd be like, it would be hilarious. It would be like that kid in during the pandemic where the father was doing a Zoom call and the kid came in the walker and everybody thought, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. No, that did not happen. I just had a bunch of very sour-faced golfers thinking, like, get this woman out of here. And they came up on stage. I ended the speech, and they were hugging my legs, and it was an epic fail. No one clapped. Dead silence. And I was so sad and bad. And I went back to my room. I actually, if you can believe it, I had the absolute audacity to go to the luau that night because they were paying me to go to the luau. I did that. Nobody talked to me. It was really ugly. And I sat there, and in that very dark moment, and I have to say, there was another layer of great sadness, which I knew that I was going home to a marriage that was not going to make it, and it was just bad. I had 4 kids. I actually thought to myself, I've got to get control of my life. And I thought, well, what if I just started making decisions in this very deliberate way? I have to slow things down. What if I actually thought everything was a decision? And I faced each one and I thought, okay, here's the decision. What are the consequences on my life in 10 minutes, the immediate future, 10 months, the foreseeable future, and 10 years? Okay, look, I was grasping for straws at that point. This seemed like a miracle to me. It seems like a simple idea. And I started doing it. I actually started doing it on the way back from the hotel to the airport. One of my kids said, let's stop at the aquarium. And I said, hold on, that's a decision. And I actually took it apart. And I said, no, we're not doing that. But here was the thing about it. And finally, at last, 20 minutes in, answer your question. The answer is this. I realized that to actually do that little process that I just described, you had to know your values. And I did not know mine. Or if I knew them, they were so suppressed and sublimated or so all over the place. And I realized everything had to go through a screen of values. And I didn't know what mine were. And I started the hard work of figuring out my values, which is the through line to this book, which is about figuring out your values. So
The point of the book is that you are not able to live an authentic life unless you are discovering your values, unless you know what they are, and you're living by them. So
okay, the point. Let me tweak a little bit.
Tweak
because I can't help it. I'm an editor, right? Here, so I would say you're not wrong, but the point of the book is that your purpose, what you should be doing with your life, lies at the intersection of 3 things. 3, okay? Your values, which are your authentically held beliefs that drive your actions and decisions. And I would say almost no one knows their values. I have actual true academic research that would suggest that only 17% of you in this room actually can define what a value is. Most of you would define a virtue, and only 7 of you could define your values. There's 15 human values. Most of you could name 3 of them. So I would say, and you're not alone, okay? That is everywhere. So your values, that would be the first sphere, which we have to excavate to find out what our values are. Then the second sphere is your aptitudes, what you're uniquely good at, what you are really good at, what you are wired to do with the 8 big cognitive aptitudes. And then also, I'm one of the social scientists who believes that your aptitudes include your personality. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, you can be really good at a job because of your personality, or you can be really bad at your job because of your personality. Okay, so aptitudes. And then the third sphere is economically viable interests, work that calls you intellectually or emotionally and also pays you. Oops, that. Okay, so you got to include that. So that, you've got to do that work. You've got to find those 3 data mines, and then your purpose is at the intersection.
there are some people who go through your exercises, and I've gone through. Suzy has an amazing tool online. It's called the Values Bridge. There's a free version and a paid version. You can take it. It's not uncomplicated. I mean, I took it and I found myself thinking, who's going to see these answers? I don't know that I want people to actually see these answers before I put my name in at the end. But there are people.
Only you see them, though. I mean, there's
well,
not
that's
like,
good to know.
No, but you can check a little box, and whoever you, I mean, if your spouse was to take them, or your partner was to take them, or whatever, if you both take the test, you check a little box, you can compare your values, but you have to check a box for that.
So there's some people who go through this work and find they actually are living in sync with their values. And there are some people who go through it and they find they are so far afield. You've had a lot of these people in your class at NYU. You've taken them through the exercise. Tell us about one of each.
Okay, sure. So the tool and the whole process, actually, one of the things you find out with Becoming You is actually it quantifies how far or how close you are to living your values. You actually get a score for that. And it's the first tool of its kind to do this. It's very exciting. My PhD advisors were very excited about it, and I'm excited about it too. So you actually get a score, because we can feel like we're living in a suit that's the wrong size, and we say, well, what's going on? And the answer usually is one of your values or two of your values, or in some cases three, you're suppressing, you're not living it. But it's true. I've taught Becoming You to thousands of students at NYU, but I also teach it in the wild, as I like to say, because NYU is wonderful in allowing me to open it up to the public a couple of times a year, and I teach it to people from ages 16 to 78, and people come from, literally, somebody came from Madagascar to take it from around the world. So it is true what you say, that some people come in and they take Becoming You and they go through the whole process. They excavate their values, they identify their aptitudes, they figure out what their economically viable interests are, they do the work, the exercises we have that land you at your purpose, and they say, I'm almost there, just a little tweak, just got to do a little this. And then other people say, uh-oh, kind of thought this was going to happen, where's the TNT? Got to blow this thing up, okay? And everything in between. And I mean, just two quick examples. I had a student, he was from Singapore. He was kind of raised to become a banker. And his parents put him in specialized schools. His name was Tashi. He went through specialized schools. And then he ended up, of course, because he was on a conveyor belt there, to become a banker. And then he pulled the ripcord himself after 4 years of banking in London to come back to business school. And it's interesting. He said, I want to go from one kind of banking, he was in retail banking, and he wanted to go to investment banking, and you typically have to go to business school to do that. And he came into class every day, and I thought, I don't know what this kid is doing in this class. He never participates. He comes in, he sits in the back row, he puts his head down. His homework is extremely cryptic. I don't know what's going on with him. Little did I know what was going on with him. The last day of class, when you are finished with your Becoming You class at NYU, and when you do the workshops, the last project is you present the narrative of your life going forward, typically for the next 30 or 40 years. You tell, if I was to live my purpose, this is what my life would unfold like in the next 30 or 40 years. And the students get up and they do this. There's never a dry eye in the house. It's extremely, this is the class, his nickname is the class where everyone cries, because everyone cries at the end, but mainly me, the big baby. I just sit there sobbing in the back. So he got up, and I thought, what is he going to say? He's going to unfold us going from retail to investment banking. And he got up, and he was wearing a suit. And he looked at the class and he said, my purpose, my area of transcendence is to dress Kim Kardashian. There was this huge laugh because people thought he was joking. And he said, I'm not kidding. He said, I've been living a lie my entire life. I have wanted to be in fashion since I was a young boy. And he told like this heartbreaking story about how he used to draw fashion when he was a little boy, and he'd give the pictures of his fashion to his parents, and the pictures would just disappear. Yeah, I know. Anyway, he very fortunately had the aptitudes. He'd been fully tested by the process up and down. He had very good aptitudes for it. His values were very aligned with fashion. His interests were obviously. And he went about, I'm actually still in touch with him. He's an apprentice for a fashion designer in London now. He had to go back to FIT, to Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. He just did a full blow up. I remember when he said it, when we finally realized he was not joking, and his presentation of his life going forward was unbelievably beautiful and touching and kind of heart-wrenching. There's one moment where you report to the class on how the world receives you. There's a test in Becoming You that helps you figure out how the world receives you and experiences you. And he said, I thought that the people I worked with had bought into the lie, but they all knew it was a lie. And he said, that was the last moment for me. It's like, why am I lying if everyone knows I'm lying? And so anyway, he blew it all up. And I remember standing in the back of the room like saying, oh my God, his parents are going to hunt me down and kill me. So I finally said to him, what are your parents going to say? And he said, I think, he long paused, and he said, I think they're going to say at last. They knew. So I had another student who took it. She was in her 40s. She presented, I have students write me a letter beforehand about why they're taking the class, and she presented in a great deal of agony. And she said, you've got to help me when I'm a CEO. When I'm a good CEO, I'm a terrible mother. And when I'm a good mother, I'm a terrible CEO. Can I get an amen? I mean, like, it's very, like any working mother has experienced these feelings. And she said, I'm just desperate. I don't know what to do. And as the class went on, I saw this sort of like increasing lightness in her, and she started to talk and raise her hand, and she presented at the end, and she had actually done this hard work of excavating her values. She went through the process, and she said, you know what? I am actually living my purpose. What I have to adjust is my mindset. I have to let go of the guilt. The guilt is helping no one. I am living my values. No one is being hurt. I'm very much values agnostic. I don't care what your values are if you're not hurting anyone. She said, I'm hurting no one. And actually, at one point, she said, I only see my daughter 2 hours a day. I had been a working mother my whole life. I thought, 2 hours a day? That's pretty good. I was like, that's okay. But anyway, I did not speak to her about it. But she had to just do a tweak. And she was off to the races. She's great now.
There were a lot of heads nodding when you honed in on guilt and this idea, right? This idea that we are terrible mothers or we're not good at work, but we are definitely not good at both on the same day. I learned a lot of lessons from my mother. I learned that if you're going to have an important conversation with your children, you need to do it in the car. And you need to be driving. But I learned from you the first time we spoke, and I think your exact words were, guilt is a useless emotion. How did you learn that, and then how did you actually give it up?
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to understand the source of your guilt, because sometimes your guilt is your conscience speaking to you, and you need to pay attention. So I wouldn't say, right, but like guilt is you not knowing what your values are. Because if you know what your values are and you're living by them, and again, not hurting anyone, then guilt is just society telling you what to feel. And so for me, once I got straight with my values, work was incredibly important to me. There's one of the values is called work centrism. It's different than another value, which is called achievement, which I'm also high on. But work centrism is about how much you want work to be the organizing principle of your life. And I love work. I've always loved work. When I was a little girl, I remember seeing my mom is an artist and my dad's an architect. They are total, absolute hippies. Hippies, correct? My parents, I'm pointing to Suma. She knows my parents are total hippies. And I remember seeing a woman in a city carrying a briefcase and wearing a suit. And I remember saying to my mother, I want that. And she said, yuck. Okay, so, I mean, I loved work from when I was young. I wanted to be a working person, and I really have high achievement as well. And family centrism, which is your family as your organizing principle. Look, I love my family. I love my children. Yesterday was Mother's Day. It was the most splendid day. I was with my kids. It's great, but my kids, for me, when I was being truly authentic, were not the organizing principle of my life. I loved them. I wanted to be with them and all those other things, but work really mattered. And when the kids would push back on me, I would say, look, someday you're going to grow up and you're going to go away, but I'm still going to be here. And I want to be this thing I've dreamed of being. Will you help me? And I had very candid conversations with them about my values. Now, look, obviously, there were plenty of times where I had to choose my children to come first because you only get one chance to see your kid go to be a black belt. There's some things you do not miss, and you make decisions. It wasn't like every single time I decided for work. But once I knew what my true values were, and I was able to speak to my kids about them and make sure they weren't hurting anybody, then why was I feeling guilt? Why was I feeling it? It was just I was listening to people who were telling me you shouldn't have those values, but that's none of their business what my values are. My value, if I'm not hurting anyone, my values are my values. I came by them honestly, just like them, by experience. And so I think you've got to let go of it, as long as it's not you saying, as long as that voice of guilt is not you saying your values are just hurting too many people and you need to adjust.
We are living through this period of huge change. Huge change. LinkedIn recently reported, and you write about this in your book, that we can expect most jobs going forward to have 50% annual skills churn. And just to translate that, what that means is that, let's say in your current job, you need to be able to do 10 things to be successful. By this time next year, half of those things will be unnecessary, and you're gonna need to know 5 new things, right? That's a lot.
Yeah, that's
That's
the
a lot
highest-
to process. So how do we figure out what we should be doing if it's constantly changing?
Yes, I think there's only one antidote, and this skill churn number is incredible. In the previous sort of 10 years, skill churn was 25%. So the number of skills turning over every year or so is massive. And I don't think there's any turning back from it right now. Obviously, with AI, it's all going to continue to accelerate. I think that our only hope is to know who we are standing still. The world is changing very quickly, and you can't keep on trying to retrofit yourself to a world that is changing that rapidly. So this is why I think it's ever more important. I think that this is sort of peak moment for knowing who you are so that you can go out into this changing world and find the places where you are fitting in terms of your values in many ways with your aptitudes, your 8 big cognitive aptitudes, which the book will help you identify, and your personality, knowing, really understanding how the world is experiencing you. And then you can turn and look, okay, what's calling me? Which megatrend is calling me? What industry is calling? There's 135 industries. I mean, I think the problem is there's great research that shows that when you're graduating from high school, you are aware of about 5 to 7 jobs. 2 of them are your parents. Okay, and the rest you can see, fireman, policeman, teacher, whatever. Then you go to college, and you would think that aperture would get wider, but it actually doesn't get that much wider. It sort of goes up to 9 jobs, and you sort of look around. But because the reason why you don't hear it is there's a lot of group think about what jobs are hiring. Okay, now it's even worse in graduate school, where there's usually 2 or 3 conveyor belts. So my MBAs, they got 3 conveyor belts. It's consulting, banking, or it used to be tech, now not so much. And they're like, wait, I'm not getting a job on those 3 conveyor belts? It's over for me. And I said, yes, except for there's 132 other industries. And so you have to be aware of what they are, which ones are growing, and you have to have an ability to do that.
You brought up AI, friend or foe?
I love AI. I love it. I understand there's ethical challenges with it, and they've got to be watched, but I mean, I use AI constantly. I think it's fantastic.
How do you use it? And how do you use it? I'm just feeling like AI is becoming my friend. How do you use it to help you?
Okay. I used it last night, much to my children's shock, because I'm kind of better at it than they are, because I'm using it all the time. I have to stay a step ahead of my students. So a marvelous thing that happened, absolutely crazy thing, was when I became a professor at NYU, this was a reinvention for me. I had had a life as a broadcast journalist and had been an author and so forth. And I became a professor late in my life, about 5 years ago, right? 4 years ago. And when I got there, I remember thinking to myself, well, one of these things is not like the other. Like, one of them just does not belong. I did not have my PhD, and I thought it's time for me to go get it. And I did this crazy thing. I remember starting to break the news to people. I actually said to the head of my department, I'm going to go get my PhD. And he said, Suzy, you just don't need to do this. You're a clinical professor. It's not necessary. And I said, I kind of have some work I really want to do. And I thought, okay, I was about to say something obnoxious. I was about to say I had great research. I thought I had great research, and I wanted to write about it. So anyway, to make a long story short, I did last week get my PhD. I defended my thesis, and I did. So, thank you. There's a point to this story, which is I got it at the University of Bristol in the UK. There's a couple different reasons for it, but one of the reasons is my area of expertise is values expression, not values formation, but values expression, and sort of ground zero for that work is being done at the University of Bristol. And I had great thesis advisors and so forth. So last night, my whole family is going to come over, and they are going to watch me get my PhD floppy hat in July when I graduate from the University of Bristol. And we decided that we would all go over for a week, and we decided exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to start off in Paris because we all really want to see the new refurbished Notre Dame, and then we want to go to see the British countryside, and then we want to end up in Bristol on July 14th. And I said to AI, hey, AI, I'm going to get my PhD, and my family and I are traveling. We are a family of people who love antique stores. Don't show us too many chateaus. We love this, that, and I sort of described my family and what we were interested in and how many of us were going. And I said, please create an itinerary. And about 3 minutes later, I had a complete itinerary.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I sent it to my kids, and they were very impressed. I mean, it's just that's how I use it. I mean, I use it so many other ways, though. I love it. Actually, I have one other way of using it. I needed to learn very quickly about a certain industry because I serve on corporate boards, and we were thinking of doing an acquisition. And I could have used Google, but I actually went into AI and said I need to come up to speed very, very quickly on this rather niche industry where we're thinking of doing an acquisition. These are the things I care about. Tell me everything I need to know. And it maybe took 5 minutes, but it was as good as a Bain or McKinsey presentation.
It's amazing. I actually used it for this interview. No, and I had so Suzy was on my podcast about a month ago. So I had a lot of questions that I wanted to ask you, but I also didn't want to miss anything that I should be asking you. So I used Perplexity, pay for the $20 subscription, asked it what I should be asking you, and some of these questions are not mine. I know.
I would never have known.
Sometimes the change that we go through is not the change of the world. Sometimes it is personal. And your life and your career over the past couple of decades has had some marked periods of ups and downs. I want to ask you how you've adjusted to a couple of them. You lost your husband and your collaborator, the amazing Jack Welch, the legendary CEO of GE. To me, he will always be the man who told me, do not get LASIK surgery. I don't know what happened to him when he got LASIK, but it was not pretty. Anyway, after his passing, you have spoken about searching for a new organizational principle for your life. Tell us how you coped.
Well, not very well. I mean, it was terrible. So I can't. I'm not a poster child for this. And the funny thing is that, we were prepared. Jack was sick for about 5 years, and then he was getting sicker and sicker, and we were fighting and fighting, and everybody was, we had great doctors. We were at the Langone Center in New York. And we were fighting. I know Sue was living this right alongside me. And I remember one day, he was in the hospital because he had a recurrence. He had cancer at the time. And he was so excited. And he said to the doctors, our son just got engaged. And the doctors were like, that's really great. And I was like, we were jumping from joy because of his absolutely magnificent now wife, and whose actually birthday is today. And the doctor said to me, can I see you out in the hallway? And I just didn't have any idea what he meant. And he said, when's that wedding? And that's how we found out how much time we had left, because they asked us to hurry up the wedding. And so we were prepared. And Jack was like, Suzy, I'm going to make sure as prepared as any person could ever be. That's the kind of man he was. He just immediately turned to me, and he immediately turned to how it was going to affect me. And I think maybe I was just worse at it than he was, and then the inevitable did occur. And even though I was as prepared as a person could be, because he had worked so hard for that to happen, and all of our children were home. Everybody was there. We were all there. We did hospice at home. Nothing prepares you. Nothing prepares you. So he died on March 1st, and then COVID arrived in the United States on March 15th. And, everybody had a terrible time during COVID, so I'm not going to raise my hand and say I had the worst time. I did have kind of a layer of complexity in it. So I went upstate New York with my kids and their spouses and our collected 7 dogs, and we were all grieving everything, and we were sort of grieving the loss of our lives. And I just remember actually laying out in the woods a lot, like on the ground, and like the kids would be like, Mom, get up. And I'd be like, okay, I was looking at the sky. It's just hard. So I think that I got very lucky, because when the world started coming back, a couple of things happened. My kids all loved me, but they left. Upstate, they were like, we're going back to the world. And it would have probably been me up there walking in the woods forever, except for that the great Hoda Kotb got worried about me. And she said, let's get Suzy back on air. And I mean, she's an amazing human being, and I revere her. And I went back on. And as I was driving into the city, I was like, my heart started to pound. And I thought, oh, maybe I missed this? And I got into the studio, and I felt the feelings you feel when you're on set. And you know from the Today Show that every person has a song, and when you come onto set, they play really loudly your song for you. And they started to play my song, and I was like, oh my God. And then I was on air, and I did a segment. It was still Kathy Lee at the time, and Hoda said, Suzy Welch, will you come back to the Today Show? And I said, well, it's like being asked to get married on the Jumbotron, right? And I said, yes, but I knew I had changed too much to do it. I was a different person, and I had this idea for a class. I had this idea for Becoming You. It had been brewing. I already had the name for it. I mean, I knew what I wanted. I had this feeling, but being back in the world gave me the courage. So I very soon after that found my way over to NYU, and I said to the dean of the business school, who I knew from my previous life, I have an idea for a class that I wish I had taken, because I think kids who are in school have no idea what to do with their life. Yeah. And he said, well, we don't have that class. And I said, but I think I might. And he said, well, let's try it as an experiment. And so here's the thing. He said, you've never taught before. Let's have you teach it to 20 people. And I said, thank you so much. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, they're going to give me a chance to teach this to 20 people. But then you tell me what happens when you take a class called Becoming You, Crafting Your Authentic Life and Career. Like, and you put that in a course catalog for a bunch of 20-somethings. And he would call me up and he said, how'd you like to teach, 40 people? And then it was, how would you like to teach 80 people? And whatever. It kind of took off, and then it was off to the races after that. Because the class, look, I went into the class the first day, and I said to the students, I'm going to ask you to go with me here. I've never taught before. I have an idea. We are all beta testers. I am the biggest beta tester of this methodology. I'm going to take all your feedback. I gave them required homework every class to tell me how I was doing. And I think later they said to me, you were so vulnerable. And I was like, what choice did I have? I wasn't going there and pretend. And so it was kind of amazing, because at the end of that semester, the dean called me and he said, we have a wait list of 800 students for your class. Wow. So I was like, what?
You know you're onto something. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to open it up. So if you've got questions, we'll have some roving mics around for you all to participate. I would bet that in this crowd, half to 3/4 of people are sitting on their Becoming You. They're sitting on their idea, that thing that is just, they want to do it, and for whatever reason, A, don't think it's possible, B, are too committed, C, maybe just aren't brave. What do you want to say?
I think you're right. It's that number of people. I want to talk to you just for 2 seconds before we go to questions, which I love to hear, about the 4 horsemen of values destruction. The 4 horsemen. And these are well-identified psychological and social dynamics, which I've renamed because I'm a teacher and I have to keep the youth delighted. I put up a slide with 4 horsemen with eyes on fire. So here they are. They all start with E because I'm a teacher, right? So the first one, here's what kills you living your purpose. Number 1, the first one is expectations. All right? I can't do that because I didn't go to that school. My parents would never allow that. I had a student who came up to me. She did her Becoming You process, and what kept on coming up after she went through all the exercises was that she should be a Roomba teacher. And I remember coming up to me saying, I just have to, I can't make this change, Professor Welch. When I excavate my values and I do my aptitudes and I do all the work and I do all the exercises, it keeps coming up, Roomba teacher. And I said, what is wrong with that? And she said, well, it makes me very happy, but I can't do that. I have an MBA. And I said, well, I'm not aware of the legislation that prevents MBAs from teaching Roomba. And she just said, I can't, nobody would ever expect me to do that. And I said, I'm not the AOT police, area of transcendence police, you gotta go be you. But, so this is expectations. And this is, I myself have been the victim of not doing something because of expectations. It's as common as humanity. Then the second one is expedience, where we don't live our values simply because it's just easier not to, okay? Like you go take a job because your roommate's uncle had a job, and you never thought you were gonna go into hospitality, but there was the job waiting for you, and they needed you, and you went and you did it. Next thing, 25 years, somebody called my podcast, she did exactly that. 25 years later, she was still in that industry, never really liking it very well. It was just easier. Or you can have a value. One of the values in the inventory that I have is scope, how big a life you want. Do you want a big, exciting life where new experiences, experiences, new ideas, new people. You almost, do you want to be Bianca Jagger on the back of a white horse going into Studio 54? That's high scope. Okay, or do you like routine and predictability, and you'll take a little bit of boredom for knowing where you're going to be in 6 months at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? I don't know who watches TikTok as much as I do. I love TikTok. They have a whole vertical for this of people who put up TikToks, and they have a little song that goes, I like this little life. And then they have pictures of their very twee little lives. Okay, and it's like, neither is right or wrong, okay? But sometimes you have high scope as a value, but you live a very low scope life because you have a spouse who wants that, and it's just easier not to disagree with your spouse. All right, so that's one of them. There's economic security, which is, I hope there's no behavioral economic professors in this room, which basically I'm going to sum up the entire field in one sentence, which is we make boneheaded decisions because of money. Okay, so even if you don't value money, you will still make a decision based on economic considerations. Like you'll take a job or buy a house or a car or enter a marriage for economic reasons, even if money doesn't matter to you. That's behavioral economics, and it kills our values. And the final is one that I really lived through myself, which is events. That events will take you away from your values and you won't go reclaim them. I mean, if I hadn't had an intervention, I wonder if I'd ever be even sitting here. I let my husband's passing take me away from all of my values. And he himself told me, don't let that happen to you, Suzy, and I still let it happen to me. And so these are the 4 E's of, the 4 horsemen of values destruction, and that is why so often one of those 4 or 3 of those 4 or 2 of those 4 is at work every time you are not on the road to becoming you.
I have to follow up and just ask, how do you know which one of them is getting in your way, and what are the blockers?
There's like a little quiz in the book to tell you exactly which one. But I think actually, I think even in saying it, Jean, I saw people nodding their heads, okay? You often know which one it is. You hear expedience, and you go, oh God. Okay, like for instance, I have one of the values in the values inventory is something that I use the Latin term for. It's non sibi. This is the incredible impulse to help people. Guess what? Not everyone has that. You know who has that? Number 1, Sue Jacobson. Non sibi, has to help people, has to wake up in the morning and help people. This is a defining value. Not everyone has it, off the charts, okay? And I have students who say, I don't want to not help people, but it's not my organizing principle. I want to go into investment banking, for instance, okay? They don't want to be working a nonprofit. But I have had students who've said to me, and people who've come to my workshops, so they're older, like, I don't care what industry I'm in. I don't care what function I'm in. I just want my job to be helping people, okay? So what your values are, and if you have high non-SIBI, and you are not living a life where that value is being fulfilled, or to use the technical term, is not being expressed, okay? Because you'll know if it's expedience that did it to you, or if it was economic security, like, okay, I took that job just for the money. But this value, when you're not living your values, a lot of times when people get their score back on the values bridge and they see their variance is like 98%, meaning you're nowhere near your values, okay? And I see this all the time, 98, 78%. And people look at it and they say, oh, nobody's surprised. People are like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. That's the problem. So, I think you know.
My variance was 13%. That's good, right?
Very good.
I did
That's
well.
excellent. That's an
Good
excellent
student.
variance.
There you go.
Well done, Jean.
All right, who's got a question?
Yes, I see in the back.
I see in the back. Yes.
In the back, there's a question.
In the back? All the way in the back. I have to say, there are maybe 7 times in this conversation that I was on the verge of tears. Anybody else? Yes, totally.
The speech where everyone cries.
Welcome to the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. Sue, thank you. You can clap for the sisterly affection part. Women are very much the fabric in this city, as you well know. Suzy, welcome to Philly.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
It's great to
I'm
see you.
Deanna Williams. I've had the honor of working with you in the past. And what I want to ask you, and just breezing through the book quickly, is fear.
Yes.
How you tackled your own fear. You shared the story with us of going to the insurance conference, dealing with your children, and that moment where it became clear to you that you just had to get through, make some decisions, acknowledge your boundaries. But I'm interested in knowing more about how you tackled that voice inside. We all have it that says you're not good enough, you can't do this, you know, the crippling voice.
Yep, I totally are. Deanna, it's so wonderful to see you, and it was my great honor to work with you. So I would say that when I walk into my classroom the first day, I also teach the big mothership management class. Okay, so you don't get away just teaching Becoming You. You have to, when you join the faculty, I also teach a big class in management. And I walk in, and in each section there's typically about 100 students, and they're bright, and they're shiny, and they're in their mid-20s, and they think, you know, everything's going to go my way. And I ask them on the first day, how many people in this room have been fired? Nobody wants to raise their hand. I've asked basically, like, who's committed a federal crime, right? They do not want to be fired. And I say, nobody raises their hand. I say, that's too bad. I can't wait until you're all fired. I hope you all get fired tomorrow. And here's why. Because when you fail, and you fail publicly, and you have a spectacular public failure, guess what you discover? You do not die, okay? And actually, the dirty little secret is everyone likes you better, because now you're much more human, and usually you suddenly start having a lot more empathy for other people because you have screwed up, and you felt like what it feels like to screw up and be down in the dumps, and you have become, your humanity increases, and guess what? You pick yourself up, and you start again, and that is how I conquered fear, slowly but surely, screwing up so many times and realizing that every single time there was a higher purpose to it. I was going to pick myself up. I was going to get through it. And that, look, it hurts. It's embarrassing, right? But once you sort of survive, as I did with my first marriage, a divorce. I mean, I had 4 little kids. I was with my high school boyfriend, who's actually now a really dear friend of mine. And, you know, everybody was like, what? This can't be happening. And you have to sort of get through the divorce is embarrassing. Then I was fired later from the Harvard Business Review after I thought I did a spectacular job. And so finally what you realize is, we have this term that we use in my company that we're all messy mess balls. I'm just a messy mess ball like everyone else. And I am going to fail. I will continue to fail. And then it gives you this courage to just keep trying. And so I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset that there's no shame in it. And you know who taught me this almost better than anyone else? Was the late, great Vernon Jordan. Okay, I have to tell you, I had an experience with him that really was massive for me. So when I met my husband, the way I met my husband, I was a divorced woman, and Jack was separated, but was not widely publicized, so he appeared to be married, okay? It was only later that it came out that he was separated. And we met when I went to go interview him for the Harvard Business Review. I went back to the Harvard Business Review, and I said, oops, guess what? Fell in love with that guy, and we're going to get married, and we have to pull the article that I wrote about him because that would be not correct. And they fired me. And it was a story on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and everybody treated it like it was this big fling. And I was like, but we're getting married. And I remember my boss saying to me, like, we'll believe it when we see it. And I was like, you're going to see it. Anyway, I got fired. And it was really ugly. It was a mess. Thank God there was no social media. Okay, there was no Twitter, nothing, but it was still really ugly. It was terrible. And in the period right after that, Jack brought me to a very fancy party in Washington, D.C. at Vernon Jordan's house. And all the fancy pants were there. Like I walked in and I was like, oh my God, it's Hillary Clinton. It's like all these people. And I was cowering next to Jack, and I wouldn't like make eye contact. I was broken. I was so embarrassed, so devastated. I thought all these people are looking at me thinking, that girl got fired. She's a disgrace. I mean, I had all these voices in my head that you're talking about, okay? And then at that moment, this spectacular 6'5", incredibly handsome man walks up, towers over me. Like Jack was shorter than I was, like he was towering over both of us. And he literally says, I heard, Suzy, that you majored in fine arts in college, which I did. And he said, come and see this amazing painting in the next room. Jack like shoves me towards Vernon Jordan, and I follow him terrified into the next room. And we're standing in front of a painting in the next room, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this is a very bad painting. Who's going to tell him? And I'm looking at the painting, and I'm sitting there, and he goes, what do you think about the painting? And I said, it's a fine painting. He said, this is a terrible painting done by my cousin. It's awful. I just brought you in here. He said, because you're scared to death and everyone can see it and you must stop it. He said, did you see all the famous people in the next room? I said, yes. He said, every one of them has failed. Every one of them has fallen on their face, been left for dead, ridiculed, made fun of, and written off, and now you're one of us. And I was like, really? And he said, yes. And then he hugged me and he said, welcome to the club. And no, and I've done that for people. I have now done that for people when I have people who've been fired, friends of mine, and I call them up and I say, guess what? It's just beginning. It's really good for you now. Okay, you got that over with. So, yeah, fear can kill you, but what fear does is it steals your life from you. And you're going to live. And then it's a great story, like the one I just told you. Okay, it just becomes a story. So, Deanna, does that help a little bit? Okay, well, all right.
Who else has a question? All right, I'm going to go here, and then I'll go to you.
Thank you. This is really fun. Too many of these stories resonate. Like, when did you take the child to the wrong work event? Yeah. I'm sure we could have a long list of those. I'm thinking as I'm hearing this, I just made a bold move and left a full-time job to do what I want to be doing next. But it's a privilege I have because I'm okay financially. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking as you're talking, what are the kinds of things we would do as a people if we wanted everyone to have the chance to do what you're describing here?
Yeah.
Like, what are the kind of policies we'd have that are different?
Right.
And
So
how would this bake in?
Yeah, one of the most exciting things I'm doing right now is thinking about ways to take this curriculum, and I'm working with a foundation, hopefully the funding will come through it, to take this curriculum and start to make it available in high schools. So that at the high school level, students can start thinking about what values mean, what aptitudes mean, and what aptitudes they have, and what interests they might have, and opening their aperture. And I think, look, in this room, there's a lot of people who are in civic-facing roles, and each one of us has a way to improve, to do our part to improve outcomes for people who have less privilege. For me, I would love to see my methodology enter into the conversation when people are younger, so that if they know their values and they know their aptitudes and their interests, they can start planning earlier, and resources can be brought to them earlier to get onto their path earlier. Because sometimes the disadvantage is that kids who have got well-to-do parents who are talking to them about this just know sooner and can organize their education sooner and so forth. And so if we can start these conversations maybe in schools and younger, it would be a systemic change, and I would love to see that happen.
Great.
That's a great
Somebody
question.
up here
Thank
had a
you.
question.
Thank you. Oh, great. Thank you so much. This was so fabulous. Danielle Devins, nice to meet you. I really love how you framed the 4 horsemen of destruction, right, for your values. Once you know what has taken you away from your values, and I think especially with events, right, when you are going through grief, you may know that's exactly what has knocked you down. How do you actually move out of that space and start moving back towards your values?
Right. This is a fantastic question. The first step, I think, is to know exactly what your values are. Again, there are 15 values, and I would say there's other values inventories. There's a famous one, the Schwartz Values Inventory, which has 19 values. You don't have to use mine. I happen to like mine very much, okay? But, I would say identify your actual values. Stop guessing. Get the list. Know what they are, ranked from 1 to whatever. If you use Schwartz, 1 to 19. If you use mine, 1 to 15. Then, try to calculate. I mean, if you use my tool, you'll get the calculation. But even if you don't, try to calculate the gap on each value. Because once you start to do the diagnoses, okay, look, I'm okay on my scope, but I have got a gigantic gap on my non-civvy, okay, that helping value. Find out where the gaps are, and then you can start to do the plan. The problem is when we try to boil the ocean, like, I'm not living my values, I've got to live them more. Well, what does it mean, okay? That's like telling people to live their purpose. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote this book is I couldn't stand people being told to go chase their happiness or live their purpose, but not being told how. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna go do that. I'm gonna go to a spa. I couldn't stand it. I'm very anti-woo-woo. I'm the anti-woo-woo girl, and I wanted a way how. And so when you're like not where you are, I want you to be very methodical. I'm a super methodical person. Get your list of your values, find out what your variances are on each one, and methodically close the gap on each one. Now, this brings me to a point that's really heavy on my heart right now, which is that one thing that's happening a lot with the values bridge is that we are seeing among Gen Z preponderance of young women of color with voice being an extremely high value, that's creative self-expression and authenticity with a gigantic gap. So what we're seeing is a very high numbers of great concern. And these women often present to me, they're young women, they come up with their results and they say voice was my number 1 or number 2 value and my variance is 100%. My variance is 98%. What should I do? And so I actually would like to create some curriculum on that point exactly. And so I do think that the next frontier for me, not that I'd like to create work for me, but here I am creating work for me, is to actually start creating curriculum around closing gaps. But sometimes you even just know. Okay, like let's just take that value scope again, which I love so much. Okay, I have very high scope, but I have a gigantic variance. I'm living a very low scope life. Well, whoever's keeping you from that, usually it's a partner that's involved with this one, okay? There's another value. Speaking of partners, sometimes people say to me, like, do you think partners should have overlapping values? And I'm sorry, but my very blunt answer is yes, I think so. I think it works better when you've got overlapping values or very closely matching values, and that's why we created the functionality where you can compare your values to another person who's taken the test. So there's a value that we call, in the inventory, we call it eudaimonia. That's the Greek word for flourishing, and it is self-care, it's fun, it's pleasure, it's leisure, it's stuff that feels good. Eudaimonia. Okay, now, we are finding generationally that 60 to 70% of Gen Z has eudaimonia as number 1. Guess what it is for the boomers and older? It's like 11, okay? So because we are generationally like you postpone joy. You know, eudaimonia is what you have after all the work is done. And actually, my eudaimonia is incredibly low, much to my children's chagrin. It's like, please, Mom, have fun. But I'm just not a high eudaimonia girl. Although, if Jack was still living, he would say that I got better at it when he was living, okay? And then I got reverted to my true self. But, you know, eudaimonia, so I will say, of all the values, if you've got one member in a partnership, okay, and she's got unbelievably high eudaimonia, and her wife has unbelievably low eudaimonia, that's a big conversation, and it can cause a lot of conflict. So I've seen couples who, I mean, sometimes we do this Becoming Us tool that we have where couples come in and do Becoming You together, if I see that they are tracking together on eudaimonia, I know they're in good shape, because if you both have the same value of fun, you can fix a lot of things. I'm sorry, I went out on a tangent on eudaimonia. It's one of my favorite values to talk about. Very controversial.
While I'm walking towards you, I actually have a question, which is this a tool that people use in their businesses? Like, can you use this tool to...
Yes, I've actually done this tool at several companies. I just did it at Google, and the leader of the team had the values that she wanted her team to have, and she was very, very clear about them, and then the team took the test, and they saw where they were on the values. Yes, teams use it, and actually another use of it is, there's 2 other uses for it in businesses. Sometimes companies, small companies or C-suite teams take it to see it so they can understand each other better and see what values they have that are similar and different, and they start speaking the language, saying, oh, well, you're so high on eudaimonia, and I'm kind of higher over here. And so they speak more frankly, and they stop saying you're this, you're that. They start talking about values. So that's one way. And then actually, I just went out to Stanford for a week because at Stanford Medical School, they've started a program for doctors who have said, raised their hands and said, I want to run a hospital. God bless them, right? They want to become doctors who run hospitals. So Stanford Medical School has put together a program for these doctors to learn business while they're there. And they asked me to come out and teach Becoming You as sort of an HR management practice that you would do with your team to help them find their purpose. So because within a hospital, you could have a lot of different roles. So it started being used. Yes, so definitely companies are using it in different ways.
But if you are already in the company and your value doesn't match what your boss wants, then you don't want to raise your hand, right?
Or you don't want to be there, okay? Because like, look, there's a value called belonging, and that's the desire to have high connectivity, join the company softball team, really be in person. Belonging is like, I always know that somebody's gonna be high on belonging, like when their favorite show is Friends, okay? And they weren't alive when it was made, okay? Like there's a lot of young people who really like Friends, right? So whatever. So if some companies and cities have values, okay? And if you're in a company that's very high on belonging and you're lower on belonging, some people just like to work alone, they're individual contributors, that can feel like a lot of friction. And like, look, some cities, I was a consultant in Bain & Company for 7 years, and when I was there, they got this brilliant idea that we were going to open a Bain consulting office in New Orleans. And they were like, we're going to own that town. Why is there no consulting firm in New Orleans? And then they sent down a bunch of people. They came back 6 months later saying, you cannot do work in New Orleans. I mean, there was just this culture of the city is fun, and the culture of Bain did not belong there. So it's definitely got work-related implications.
Interesting.
First of all, thank you so much for your talk. Very insightful.
Thank you.
One thing I heard you mention, you talked about teaching your class, young students, et cetera, and older students as well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as people age in the different life stage, maybe 40, 50, 60, et cetera, sometimes there can be a sense of being stuck, but not failed, right?
Right.
Successfully stuck. Right? And what does that look like for people at a different life stage, not in their 20s, later on? Right. What advice do you give them?
So I do workshops. I think I mentioned that NYU is wonderful, and I'm allowed to do these wonderful workshops and a lot of times the workshops are filled with women and men 50 and older. Okay, the oldest person who's taken Becoming You is 78. And they are in a different place. They're figuring out what to do with the third half of their life, as they call it, right? That they are saying, okay, I'm here, but I'm here by habit, okay? And I wanna make sure that that habit's okay with me, that it's good enough. And so they go through Becoming You, and they do feel this sense of stuck, but they also have this sense, some of them feel like this sense like, if this is what it is, this is what it is, but is there a way out? And then what the big eurekas for them often come in the values part about which values have not been actually lived. Okay, wait a minute, I had this value my whole life and I never fully lived it, okay? And how do I actually unleash it? Or they discover they had an aptitude that they never really, that they left a huge opportunity on the table. One thing that I remember, this one woman who scored off the charts on an aptitude that's called spatial visualization, which is described in the book. You can test yourself for it in the book. And she said, my whole life I wanted to be a decorator. And I didn't know I had the aptitude. And I said, but you really do. She totally blew it up. She was ready to retire, and she started her own little design firm. So I think you can unstick yourself when you've got the data. The thing about pivoting later in your life is you're just scared to do it because it's new to you. But if you have the data that proves it's an okay thing to do, you're much more inclined to do it.
Do people's values change throughout their life?
Oh, what a great question. So this is the kind of thing I'll be discussing at the Academy of Management in Copenhagen in July. There's very clear, rock-solid science that shows that our aptitudes are pretty set by 15. Okay, that's about it. 15 aptitudes are set. Values, the data is very mixed. It's a very blurry field. I think that in 5 to 10 years, thanks to the values bridge, we will actually have the data on whether values change. My sense from empirical data is that they're much more stable than we think, and what changes is our level of how much we suppress them, that our values are pretty stable. By the way, I must say something. The values bridge was designed and developed by a Philadelphia firm, Griffin, which is here tonight. Let's give them a round of applause, because it was... When I was a startup, and I wanted to have a design and development partner, and the New York firms were scary to me because they were unbelievably pompous and expensive, and I thought, I'm going to try to see if there's a firm in Philadelphia, and I found Griffin, and I couldn't, nothing, this book wouldn't be possible, the tool would not be possible if I hadn't had a partner here in Philadelphia, so thank you. All right, okay, any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, this is really very fascinating.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on
Okay,
1 second.
all right,
Let me
okay.
just get
Here
you
comes
the
the
mic so
mic.
we can get you on the recording.
Is it on? Yeah. It's fascinating
Thank you.
information and very different than what I thought it was going to be about. But what I'm curious about is look about the 95% of the people in this country who maybe have 3 or 4 jobs or 2 jobs at least to get by.
Yes.
Does this apply to them?
Okay, so this is a fantastic question. And, I understand, and I write about this a lot for the Journal, which is there are some premises that go into this, right? One is that you've got a job. And I understand that there are people for whom just getting by, just survival is all. And I would say, like, okay, you don't have you're not in the place right now to think about it. But here's the thing is, I don't want to presume, and I think there's a certain kind of reverse discrimination to presume they don't want purpose. Okay, I think even if you're just going to get by, you want to know this stuff about you. So when the moment comes, you know, that you are closer to it. Even just knowing your values, because even if you're not living your purpose at work, you want to be living your purpose in your personal life. And so I do think that this is, like, there's a certain presumption here that you've got a job. I kind of work very hard to make sure that, and I definitely, because of the beauty of social media, have lots of conversations and interactions with people who are in the trades and who do not have educations and so forth. I think the data excavation, I think every person, no matter where they are, would like to be closer to their purpose. And my purpose is to help them find out what their purpose is. And whether or not there are a lot of people who have got every means in the world and have everything that you could ever imagine, and they are the people who feel the furthest away from their purpose. I think that it's not something that only well-to-do people can have access to. It's a great question, though. And this is actually another reason why I would love it to go into high schools. I'd love people to start talking about these issues younger, because the younger you are when you kind of the younger you are when you understand especially what your aptitudes are, the more opportunities there are for you. One of the worst things in the world is to sort of be pushed on a conveyor belt. This is where people like you go to work, and then you find out years later you had all these aptitudes that could have opened up huge vistas for you, and you just did not know it.
You could be a fashion designer for Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I think we could take one more question if we have one more question. Okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, my great pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
So I didn't mention in the beginning, and this is a good crowd for it. We have for the second year we are doing what we call RAD Awards, and these are awards for women in a bunch of different spheres in Philadelphia and allies who are kind of kicking ass at what they do. So please go on to the philadelphiacitizen.org/rad, I would say. And we would love to have your nominations for people who we should honor this year. We have a big party at the end of July for that. So you are all invited. Thank you so much.